joining us once again. Today is an exciting time for two reasons. First, we are on our new platform. We created a Talking Business platform where you can see us under our name and moniker. So thank you for all those of you who have joined. Don't worry, I will continue to share it with Going Overtown as well. But I am very excited that we are now opening up a little bit more to an audience of folks a little bit beyond Overtown. The second reason why this is going to be a really good show is the young woman that is coming on today, Sandy Dorsainvil, hope I'm saying that correctly, is the executive director of the Little Haiti Cultural Complex. But we're going to get a chance to talk to her about both the public and private side of event production. So that's going to be very interesting for me, of course, and I hope you learn some stuff as well. So without further ado, we have Sandy Dorsainvil. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for agreeing to join us today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Look, when Yvette called and was like, we got to have her on the show, I was like, yeah. Look it up. Go ahead.
We all do what Yvette told us to do.
Exactly. So first we'll start with, who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Sandy Dorsainvil. Hi, everyone. And I guess I wear two hats. I manage the Little Haiti Cultural Complex, which is the Little Haiti Cultural Center and the Caribbean Marketplace that is located in the city of Miami in District 5. And I also am a partner in a special events location called Noir. That's also located in Little Haiti in District 5.
Okay. Well, let's start with the public side first, because that's the side that probably has been in the safest space right now, considering what we're going through. What has that management process been in trying to, I mean, you don't have to worry about your doors closing. That's a good thing. But you have had to adjust your programming. What have those conversations been like, and has that transition started to happen already?
Well, first, the idea that we don't have to worry about our doors closing, I'm not sure. It's not a conversation that I've had with my immediate directors, but it's always a possibility because the city's priority is always going to be what is best for their constituents and for the residents of the city. And a cultural center, a community space is always needed, of course. Or wanted, I should say. But when we start talking about maintaining jobs, keeping the city functioning, safety, those things take precedent. But for now, because we are an important point of distribution of information for the Haitian American community that frequents the cultural center so much, we are an essential location. But that can change at any point. Good. And then in terms of events and programming, we've had to pivot like many other businesses. We've had to try to continue to give service to our patrons without sort of missing on the flow of things, which is hard to do in the middle of a pandemic. But we've moved, like, for example, this is my peak season. It's the Little Haiti Cultural Center. Right. We're in the middle of Haitian Heritage Month. Right. Normally, myself, my staff, and all the organizations we work with would be in Team No Sleep. Right. So every single day we would have an event at the Cultural Center or at another location in Little Haiti. Right now, we're trying to transition some of those events online. But the biggest issue we're having is finding talent that can make those pivots happen for us. Because we have to have someone who not only understands the technology, but can translate that technology into these different art forms so that they're still presentable, they're still interesting, they're still exciting in a virtual situation. Absolutely. And because people are used to coming to a festival where they can dance and they see interesting dances and they see people, and it's a vibe. And the food, now trying to get that vibe to translate on the screen. Right. So we're still in the process of, number one, training our staff, and I've been taking one lesson after the other, online classes, trying to figure out how to use some of these platforms myself. Because again, because of the pandemic, I can't just go out and say, oh, I'll hire somebody, or I'll ask the city to hire somebody, because all that costs money. And right now we're we're in budget cutting mode.
Right,
We're in
right.
the process of trying to save money and use money more efficiently. So hiring new people is not on the radar. It's basically training the people you have to be able to do this pivot.
Very cool. Now, I know the Little Haiti Cultural Center, it has two kind of components to it. There's sort of the event space side, and then there's a marketplace side.
Mhm.
First, with regards to the events, I know it's been a residency for several local talent organizations. I'm sure at this point you have had to rethink how they function within the
Yeah.
venue, if they are able to function at all. And to talk a little bit about, have some of those organizations that you've mentioned been able to transition to an online platform? Is this something that can continue? And with the potential opening next week, what might that conversation be at this point?
Well, for now, since we've been close to the public, the 11 resident companies they haven't been able to come into the building except to take a few items or maybe to clean up their spaces. We are not sure that the cultural center will open to the public in what the city is calling phase one
Right.
of the opening. We haven't gotten word yet. We know, so the cultural center and the Caribbean Marketplace belong to the Parks and Recreation Department. And so we are part of that
Mhm.
connection of parks. So
Mhm.
we're not sure which parks will open yet and which facilities will open yet.
Mhm.
If we were to open, now the question becomes, what are the capacities of each one of the rooms? Our theater that takes 300 people, do we now cut it down to 150 or maybe 100? And
Mhm.
if we do things like that, does that still leave a large enough profit margin for these small arts organizations that are using it for performance or want to use it for performance?
Mhm.
So before, if you were charging $25 a head, 300 people, so you could make up to roughly, excuse the math, maybe $7,000 to $8,000 in
Mhm.
ticket sales, and the $860 that you paid to use the theater seems minimal.
Mhm.
But if now your profit margin is only
Just
about
cut it in half.
$4,000,
Mhm.
cuts in half, using 20% of that just to cover the basic fees, it becomes, so we're going to have to start looking at different ways of programming. So maybe now a play wouldn't just happen once on that Saturday. You might have a matinee show in the morning, have a show in the afternoon, and then have like a VIP or a show in the evening at 6 or 7. So
Mhm.
that way that organization can get more bang for their buck since they have less people in the audience.
And
And
could
then
you adjust the ticket prices based on the matinee versus morning?
the thing is, the idea also is what our ticket price is going to look like, because these local organizations usually are producing things for the local community, which they're already providing the service at the lowest possible cost
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
ensure that everyone can participate and that everyone's included. So
That's gonna have to be a
lowering the
conversation
ticket
of
price even lower, at what point does the artist now,
give
how are
away.
they able to support
Mhm.
themselves? I
And
think a
are
lot
you
of
able
times,
to help them coach through those conversations?
yes, so
Okay.
we are having those conversations. We're putting together workshops where
Mhm.
we can, work together, because we sort of count on each other. They keep the center alive and bustling and happening, and we give them a space to create and to produce and to do what they do best.
Okay.
So right now we're coming into the summer season for them. Many of them provide services to our parents for the youth, summer
Mhm.
camps, very explicit and detailed, and dance intensive, theater intensive,
Right.
some tutoring, some academic reinforcement. So we're trying to figure out what that's going to look like. What are the cleaning protocols going to look like?
Yes, yes, yes.
It's really super complicated, but you got to do what you have to do to survive.
Exactly, exactly. Now let's talk about the marketplace. I've been there several times, and the marketplace is an amazing place. You can get spices and foods, and those are essential businesses.
Mhm.
Um, but have you been able to open with the marketplace, and how has that impacted those businesses, those vendors?
Same thing as with our performance agencies. Because we're a government entity, we had to shut down. So those small businesses were forced to close as well. And we're still in conversation of what reopening will look like for them,
Mhm.
because many of them may not be able to follow the stringent cleaning protocols and rules that we will have to put in place as a public space to ensure public safety. So
Right.
that is going to be it's an ongoing conversation that I'm having with my directors and that the city is having, not just for our facility, but for all facilities.
Okay.
You want to open to the public, you want to give a sense of normalcy back to the citizens of the city, but at the same time, public safety is always the number one priority. And if you have a space that's supposed to, attract tourists from all over. You
Right.
don't know where they're coming from. You don't know what they touch. You don't
Well,
want what
right
airplane
now,
they got
airplane
off
coming.
of. So you want them. You want to welcome them, and you want to teach them about our culture and teach them about this little golden nugget in the city of Miami. But we also, are we taking temperatures at the door? Are we asking people, did you travel recently to a European country that has high cases of coronavirus?
But
Like,
yeah, an American state.
exactly. Did you come from New York? It's like all these things. There's going to be that thin line between invasion of privacy
Right.
and, and my staff and I had a long meeting about that yesterday. Like, where do we draw the line where it becomes intrusive and almost, where you're automatically assuming this person has this illness just because of where they just told you they traveled. It's very, we haven't figured it out yet.
And
but it's an
especially
ongoing
when
conversation that we have every day because we need to open sooner than later.
exactly. And especially when you have some situations where I know you've seen some grocery stores where people have been offended when you have to put on a face mask.
Correct.
What does that conversation look like in an event space,
Correct. Because right now, currently, it is required to wear a face mask in every single City of Miami facility.
Right.
That's a requirement.
Okay. So yeah, then that might be a problem for some folks. But
correct.
So before we flip on the other side, I just wanted to, there was another question I really wanted to know. Well, actually, it isn't. Let's flip to the other side. Let's go to your private business, if you're okay with that. Tell us a little bit more about what that event space is and how it came to be.
So Noir, my baby, because it was my baby, Noir was basically my dream event space, and my two mentors, Carol Ann Taylor, who's a great businesswoman in Miami, and has had businesses at the Miami International Airport for many years, as well as at Bayside, and who's also a jazz singer, as well as Juanita Britton, who's a native of Detroit, but lives in DC and has airport businesses throughout DC, Maryland, and Virginia. They've been my mentors for years and have invested in me and have taught me a lot about entrepreneurship and just event planning. For years.
Can I cut you off really quickly? I'm sorry. We didn't hear the second person. If you could say that before.
Oh, sure. Juanita Britton.
Okay.
So Juanita, I met through Carol Ann Taylor. They've been friends for many years because they both have businesses in airports.
Okay.
Juanita is originally from Detroit, now lives in DC and in Fort Lauderdale, and has several airport businesses, I think 32.
Wow.
Or 22, in the different airports in DC, Virginia, and Maryland. So they've been great mentors to me, taught me a lot about entrepreneurship, have financially invested in me, have emotionally and socially invested in me. And for years, they've been saying, little girl, when are you going to do, when are we going to do something together? When are we going to do our own thing, something that has our own vision? And I had been looking for spaces. And finally, on a coincidence, the three of us were having lunch one day and we're driving around Little Haiti and literally saw this business closing. And they were like, that's the location. It's freestanding. It has its own parking. That would make a wonderful multi-type event space. So after many conversations, many phone conferences, we came up with the concept of Noir, which means Black in French. And it was a boutique lounge gallery. So the space was divided into 3 spaces. the entrance was basically a beautiful art gallery, and the middle space was set up like a lounge where we had live music could be played, live bands could play, and then we had a beautiful outdoor area that could be used for outdoor entertainment. And we officially opened last year in September in 2019. It was beautiful. It was fabulous. And, we had our struggles like every new business. Roof caved in a couple of times. Yes.
Really?
We had.
Did you have somebody check out the structure before you went into this?
We did. But, we also opened right after, maybe about 2 months after we opened was when Miami was going through their monsoon where it would rain buckets for hours at a time. And it is an older building.
Right.
So even after inspection and things like that,
wow.
I guess, I have to say hindsight 2020, maybe our inspection wasn't as good as we thought.
Right.
But basically, we were told we were good to go, but the roof just did not survive.
Wow.
Could not take on those rains. And we were shut down for a few months, then pivoted, reopened, relaunched again. And we were doing okay. I wouldn't say well, but we were surviving and we felt like our investment was safe. But after a few physical issues with the properties, and then a few permitting issues with the city, and then finally Corona, we had to say, okay, what makes the most sense? Do we cut all losses and maybe reopen someplace else or pivot and do something else? And finally we said, you know what? For now, we're going to close our doors, because it's not just the 3 months that we would have been closed for coronavirus, but let's just say the city does open up and allows us to open in June or July. People are still going to be leery of gathering in large groups. And in the event world, you really make your profit in the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make your profit unless someone just does a straight rental from you. But the majority of time, the most profit you make is when you're producing your own events and you have those large numbers and your bars producing and your doors producing revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So when we did the math, it and the amount of sort of equity that has to go into it, it just didn't make sense. So we decided about a week ago to close our doors.
So how did the conversation come up? Because I got to say, you're the first person I've spoken to who's actually going through a transition. We talked a little bit about on this show about some people are going to have those hard and fast conversations with first themselves and then like you, a partnership. Who was, and you don't necessarily have to call out a name per se, but how did the conversation start that I think it's time for us to make a decision?
Well, my partners and I, we have a conference call. So it's interesting that even with the virus, things didn't change for us. But we had a conference call every week where we basically went through the finances of the business, what's the balance in the checking account looking like, what bills are pending, what upcoming events are happening. And every week, the balance in the account was getting lower and lower.
Mm-hmm.
We were having to put in our own personal income in. And then maybe 2 weeks into the coronavirus, we were like, remember I told you my partners both have businesses in the airports.
Yes.
That have also shut down.
Exactly.
And
about that.
I'm very cognizant of the fact that they are both very successful businesswomen.
Mm-hmm.
They did this project for me.
Mm-hmm.
This was their investment. This was them pouring into me, giving me a chance to live my dream out. And, and of course they wanted to make money. They're businesswomen, but they were really trying to support something that I really had been talking about forever. And they wanted to give me a chance.
Right.
So I, in good conscience, was like, I can't ask them to invest any more money in something that is just not going to bring any revenue anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pouring. So at that point now, I'm pouring more of my personal revenue into it. And it just didn't make sense. So after 2 weeks of doing this, and then we're doing the book, we're doing the math, and we're looking at the ledger, and we're realizing that, okay, a couple of $1,000 is about to lose life again. And we're not going to be able to get that back.
Mhm.
And because of the type of business we are, and because we had limited employees, we did not qualify for a lot of these bailouts.
I was
So
gonna ask.
PPP and this and that, a
Mhm.
lot of these,
Mhm.
we had not been in business long enough to qualify for
Mhm.
some. Others were only to be able to pay salaries
Mhm.
and employees. And we were working with independent contractors because of the nature of the business we were in. So we didn't qualify for those. So
Mhm.
there was no financial help coming in any direction. So it just didn't make sense to keep pouring into something.
So, I'm sure there are always lessons learned, like you said, in hindsight. Would you do this again?
I
And
would.
good,
I'm a
good.
glutton for punishment. I would, because I would. I would just do it smarter. I would do it
Right.
smarter.
And what
I'd
are those
invest in
smarter
more
tips?
attorneys
What are those?
because some of our issues were because we trusted our own judgment and some of the documents, we reviewed them ourselves and we had an attorney glance over it, but we didn't have our own attorneys draw up our own documents. I
Right.
think we would have taken a smaller hit financially if we had some better contracts in place.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Wow.
Definitely inspections of the property that we decided to lease
Mhm.
and our leasing agreement. I think we would have also had attorneys that were experts in leases and in
Mhm.
contracts to look at them instead of our using attorneys that we use for other, people assume, a lawyer is a lawyer is a lawyer. That is
Mhm.
not the case.
I
Everyone has an expertise, and the person who's an expert in leasing and is an expert in business contracts will will put in language that will protect their client
okay.
more stringently. And so I think we would have probably definitely done that better and just made the investment. But, like many small businesses, we were trying to cut corners and
Mhm.
make things happen in a faster pace. And we're trusting our own judgment
Mhm.
and trusting our own experience, which did protect us in many occasions. But I think if we had went to some legal professionals, and especially
Mhm.
when it comes to leasing and when it comes to just contracts, we would have come out of this maybe not ahead, but we probably would have broke even instead of
Right.
coming out at a loss.
Well, and it's interesting you mentioned that because I've been time and time again, each person on this show has talked very much about making sure you have your documents in order, and that includes things like your contracts. We talked
Mhm.
intellectual property attorney who was also very adamant about sort of these cheat methods that you use, especially in places like creative industries, event production industries, don't help. Ultimately, may in the long run, it may cost you more up front, but will save you money on the back end. So,
Yeah, everything is okay until it's not okay.
right,
you know,
which is
and I think
foreign that was in the contract.
Yeah, and I think as a business person, I've learned that you just have to function as if everyone's trying to sue you, as if everyone is trying to get over on you, because there's just no trust in business. Period. It's nothing personal,
Mhm.
and I think as women, and I even think as African Americans, especially someone like myself who really believes in doing business with my community
Mhm.
and doing business with people who look like me and people who are going to invest in my community, um, we take it personally, and I wanted to have a sense of trust and believing in people and things like
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
which sounds beautiful, especially because I come from that art world and you want that love and touchy feely and
Mhm.
everybody's supporting everyone. But the reality is,
Business,
um,
business.
business is business, and when you're talking about money,
And even
um,
in the art world, business is business.
business, yes. And
Right.
when you just have to protect yourself and you have to protect your interest, and um, anyone who's in business to make a profit, to make money,
Mhm.
will respect that. They might be upset about it and annoyed, but the bottom line is later on when things go left, they'll be happy you did it, because then everybody will be protected and there won't be as many surprises.
Right, right,
Because,
right.
that's the part that gets people panties in a bunch, It's all the surprises. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. And I didn't know I was responsible for that. And what do you mean you're
Right,
not going to pay for that? That's what gets people upset, because you think, oh, I know what's going to happen if things go wrong.
right,
And then
right.
when you realize, oh no, I had it all wrong legally, X, Y, and Z. And it's like all of a sudden you're feeling very vulnerable, and like you're just standing out in the street naked because you didn't have the proper things in place.
Right, right, right. So talk us through, and before I ask you this question, I'm actually very excited because, I'm on this system where I finally get to see some feedback from the audience, from social media. So Kanimo Williams, who I believe has said, thanks for
I do. That's my
we'll keep
boy.
asking her more questions. I'm sure she's a wealth of information. I'd like for you to talk about the step 1, 2, and 3 of, okay, we've made the decision to close. Now what happens? What, closing date, we got to do some stuff. How does that work?
Well, first, taking inventory of my assets. Like, we literally went through, what do we own?
Mm-hmm.
And to know the real numbers. How, like, when we went through our accounts and we went through what we put out, how much revenue we got in for the year. And okay, so what's the real number that we lost, or what's the real number of what we made? So once we knew that, then we're like, okay, if there is a pivot going to happen in 2021, this is the goal. And then just set up a new plan. So that was the first thing, to just to get the plan on paper, so that we had a guideline of how we were going to move in this process. And then 2, we made the decision, okay, we're going to close. Well, what does that mean financially? How much is that going to cost? Because it's not like everything costs money in business.
Mm-hmm.
So we're closing. You got to pay someone to take the sign down, pay somebody to pack all that stuff up. Some of it I could do myself, but some of it I had to pay someone. And then where am I going to put it? Am I going to sell it? Does it make sense to sell it? Does it make sense to keep it? And after talking to my partners, we were like, well, we don't give up. We're going to pivot. So it didn't make sense to be in this location because of the cost of the lease and the high overhead, but we're going to relocate someplace else.
Good.
So now that's where I am. I'm in stage 2, where we're looking for a new location that is going to work with the numbers that we now have to work with.
Okay.
Because we're no longer at the startup phase where we had, a pocket of money saved up that we invested in this initial, and then we had the plan of how we were going to get our money back, and then of course make money. So now we're working with a smaller pot of money, probably 10% of what we already started with, and also because of the pandemic, the amount of sweat equity I can invest and my partners can invest in the project too is limited, because all 3 of our 9-to-5s are taking precedent, because we got to make sure we're successful and we're doing a great job in those 9-to-5s, because that's what's feeding us right now.
Right.
There isn't this supplemental income coming from this business,
Right.
So we're looking for a location that will less overhead, less financial commitment for us, but we can put in a little bit, bring in some partners, and to keep the concept going, because we still believe that the concept was a winner. The idea of doing a space that really promoted fine art, that was Black at every level, in terms of production, in terms of the artists we represented, in terms of the clients we brought in that celebrated Black culture in every way. So that's the whole point. Okay. And we believe in it. So we don't want to let that go. So it's just now finding a new location. And then phase 3 will be, okay, we found this location, we're moving in. How much time are we going to be able to invest in this? And this is all part of phase 1, really. Like, I'm thinking this through now. And the goal is before I sign any lease and commit to doing this again in phase 3, we will know, okay, this is going to take this many hours a week. I'm going to need this much money to make this really happen. I'm allotting this amount of time of no revenue because of this whole pandemic rebound situation. And I can survive this amount of time with very small revenue. And then with effort and marketing and so on and so forth, pivoting to start generating revenue at the highest level by this and this date. And giving myself that window of time also in that timeline to say, if it doesn't look like it's working in this window of time, then
it's time for us to let this
take the lessons. Yeah. Thank you, Lord, for the blessing, and let it go.
Right. Which is that's the hard part, is that I got to let it go, because you've been holding on to this dream for a very long time. So that's the hard part. Now we have a question from Natasha Ramato. I hope I said your name right. How much of what you mentioned in the closing of the business can be written off on your business taxes? That's a really good question.
Some of it can be written off. Some of the payments that we made for rent, some of it can be written off. But this is also a hindsight 2020. A lot of the money that we invested as individuals into the business, we invested it from our personal accounts. So I wrote a check from Sandy Dorsainvil to Noir, and that cannot be written off.
Right.
But some of the money that I did for Maximilian Consultants, which is my business, my consulting business, that I can claim some of it. But not that much. It's all, that's another reason, another hindsight 2020 for those watching. When you're doing you're setting up your business plan, yes, you need an attorney, but you also need to involve your accountant in the planning phase, because I had already written a lot of personal checks before I included my accountant, who later on was like, what are you doing? You need whatever money you're putting into this new business needs to come from your other business so that it can be written off. Because if you're doing it from your personal, it's harder. It's not that it's impossible, but that's more balance, checks and balances. Your accountant's going to have to do make a lot more paper number magic, which he's going to charge you more for.
Right.
So that involve your accountant, CPA, bookkeeper, whoever it is that's helping you with your numbers and balancing your books in your conversation as you're setting up your business and going into these partnerships, because you can't just pull money from your bank account and say, hey, I'm going to invest this and then include them afterwards. Because even where you pull the money from and how you pull it from, if you're pulling it from your 401k, whatever, all these different conversations, they need to be able to tell you how to make that happen so that in the long run, you can benefit if there's going to be a tax break and things like that. But if you don't invest the money or pull it from the right account and they don't tell you exactly what to do, Uncle Sam is going to keep a lot more of that money than they would have had to if you did it the right way.
Absolutely. Because we've talked a little bit about relationships that you have to have. And I remember taking a workshop. I talk a lot about the workshops I've taken where they talk about you need to have a team. And as you mentioned, a lawyer, accountant, and a banker. Those need to be the relationships you have in order to really try to drive your business and grow your business. So thank you for that question, Natasha. That actually was a very good one. I didn't even have that on my list.
Stephanie, I also want to say something about the team. I think lots of times as small businesses, we're like, I can't afford a team. And if I have a team, that's more people for me to share my profits with. And I'm barely making profits as it is. In the long run, if you have a transparent and clear conversation with people and you bring them in, maybe you can't afford to pay your accountant the $150 an hour but if you have a conversation with them and they see what your books are like, and if you're small, you're simple from that accounting perspective, work out an agreement with them, and especially if you got this brilliant idea and if you're doing something that accountant, that lawyer sees has potential, they'll be willing to work with you at a slower rate in the beginning. And then, their costs will grow as you grow.
That's true.
It's important to have that advice. Like, is priceless advice, because we can't be experts in everything. We may have bits and pieces of knowledge, but trust me, you need that expertise knowledge when things go left.
And also remember, several lawyers and accountants are small business owners themselves. So they know where it's coming from. And, no, I can't do it for you for free. That, that's an unreasonable ask. But will I be willing to work with you? I have found, like you, that they're workable as long as you are, as you said, transparent and say, I don't have the money now, but let's see how we can grow together. So that's very cool. And yes, thank you very much for those tips, because as I mentioned, there's a projection that maybe 40% of the businesses in the, during the pandemic will close. And that's a soft projection. I've had several other people who have said that's going to go a lot higher if you take into consideration some of the vendors that are using this as their business as self-proprietors. Actually, I have another question for you that popped up really quickly. So Kanemo Williams asked, I'm looking to open a brick and mortar myself, which would have been easier to lease all of your stuff that you had in the building than to actually own it. Wait, would it have been easier to lease all of your stuff that you had in the building than to actually own it? Okay, I get it. So would it have been easier to lease the equipment than own it?
Some of the equipment we did lease for bigger events. So we didn't own all of our tables. We only owned like the first 10 or 15, I believe. We didn't own all the chairs. We owned maybe 20, and we leased. If we needed more for bigger events, we would lease them. The reason in the end we did not lease everything was because I am a yard sale, garage sale, offer up junkie. And it just financially, it was just cheaper. Like the cost. So that's why we ended up. And then also because we knew a lot of our business was going to be with small organizations, and a lot of our business came from Black Professionals Network, Haitian American Democratic Club, a lot of these smaller groups, that they needed to just be able to walk into an event space, bring their food and go. Right. They in themselves, the client, a lot of our clients in and of them, did not have money to rent a table and a chair and linens and make it look beautiful. So the idea was to have the basic things there so that these small groups could pay a lower rental fee and still have everything that they needed. And then also I knew in the long run, now that we were closing our doors, that now I own this stuff and I can sell it and I wouldn't have lost everything. Sometimes for the more expensive big ticket items, it is cheaper to lease, especially if storage is an issue and keeping is an issue. But most of the time, you're renting a chair, especially a nicer one, let's just say $5 a day, and you need it 4 days. You're already looking at $20, and you can go buy a chair, the same exact chair sometimes that somebody else used and is selling for the same price, and keep it and not have to keep paying that rental fee. So it all depends. When you're doing your inventory list in the beginning of opening the business and looking at what you need, you got to do the comparison. You're going to need a projector, and it costs like $600-700 to rent a projector with a screen and so on, just for one weekend. And then you go and you realize you can buy that same projector, maybe used, for $300. It makes sense to buy it. And own it, and then you have it constantly. Because that takes a little bit of space. Now, can our big elaborate glass tables and fancy furniture, they cost thousands of dollars. We didn't have storage space. Those things we leased.
So can you tell us a little bit about the emotional, I'm trying not to say toll, but the emotional toll it takes to say, this is your baby, as you mentioned, that I'm going to close these doors. And this first effort didn't quite work the way I envisioned it. Talk a bit about your feelings around that.
I cried. I cried because I've never, ever been a quitter.
Right.
Like, I'm that girl who convince herself she can run a race, even though I haven't really rehearsed and da 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 da. And I'll limp to the finish line, but at least I finished. I'm that person, and so are my partners. So it did feel like a failure. It did feel like we shoulda, coulda, woulda ourselves to death. We should have did this. We could have did that. And, it was a lot. But then I had to snap out of it. There's not really much time for that.
Right.
Like that literally was a 24-hour period. And then I had to snap out of it and say, oh, this is money. This is business. There's tomorrow. Pivot. What is your pivot going to be? The only way this is a failure is if you don't figure out, number one, the lessons that you're going to get from it. And number two, how you're going to use those lessons and what you have left of that business to move on to do something bigger, greater, more impactful for the community, more meaningful for yourself and your family, more legacy building, so on and so forth. So, but that's the long-term feelings. That whole, I'm a pivot, but I always tell people, don't be like, I'm not ashamed of the fact that I cried. I had to have that moment with myself because I put in a lot of waking up at 6 a.m. To get my mom duties done, feeding children, getting children to school, then doing what I needed to do for my 9-to-5 job and getting all that done. And then after my 9-to-5 job, from 6 sometimes to 1 o'clock in the morning, doing what I needed to do for this business. And this was 7 days a week for almost a year.
Right. Yeah.
So, you put in a lot into it, and then, you have those highs, the grand opening, it's so beautiful. And then people are coming in, they're so happy. So you have all of that. And you have all these people rooting you on. And then to get to this point and you're like, wow, I got to close the doors. But then, we got to be realistic. It's a global pandemic.
Right.
I'm not going to lie. The fact that it's a global pandemic, it soothes my wounds a little bit. It makes me feel like, girl, what you going to do?
I can't do nothing about that.
Can't do nothing about it. What you going to do, Cletus?
This is the time. I'm going to do it.
What you going to do? So that was... that did soften the blow for me, because I'm not in this alone. I have people like yourself. I have people like Yvette Harris. I have people, so many, my best friends, Natasha and Dinkinish, who are giving me emotional support. You have all these people who are in it with you because everybody's going through something right now.
Absolutely.
I definitely know. I wouldn't use the word easier, but the blow has been less harsh. Because I'm not going through it alone, because the world is going through it. I'm absolutely positive somebody having this experience 6 months ago before the global pandemic, it was a totally different emotional feeling.
Right.
Because people weren't as sympathetic. Right now, people are so sympathetic.
That's true. They're fighting.
Before, people be like, well, girl, ain't nobody tell you to open a business. It's a different vibe when everybody's not going through it. Right. Yes.
And we talked about, with small business, a lot of times you feel like you're working in a silo. You're cooped up in your office or your space or home or wherever that is. And nobody's talking to you. Nobody's talking about these fears and these possibilities and needing to make these hard and fast decisions. And so, that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to open up this show, because it now puts on Front Street the challenges and concerns of the business owner, and you find that you're not the only one. A lot of stuff you're talking about, I'm just going through my wheelhouse, going, yeah, I felt that. I've lived that experience. Kanimo actually wanted to ask really quickly for us to both talk about our teams. And I'm assuming you mean by team the accountant, the lawyer, and the who did I say, banker? Would you like to start, and then I'll share a little bit about my team a little bit.
I mean, I have a village. It's not even just a team. I had a village. I sit on the board of the Black Professionals Network, BPN, and Kanasha Paul. She's a really great resource, and I could give her this shout out because she has. It just feels like 20 million Rolodexes of people who can help you with everything from marketing to rentals. So she was a big resource for me. And she pointed me in a lot of the right directions and just helped me sort of map out what my plan was going to be when I was opening, and even now as I'm making my final
Mhm.
pivot to reopen or to do to change this into another platform. Um, you know, I always thought publicists and PR people were for celebrities until I met Miss Yvette Harris.
I know, right? Like,
I don't know if all publicists and PR people do what she does, but talk about somebody who will keep you on your toes and on point. So she has been just a miracle worker. And I think everyone needs a publicist and if you're in a business that requires you to have that type of interaction with the public, it's an art form.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to get publications and to get other organizations to see
Mhm.
what you're doing. So having a marketing person or a PR person, and there is a very distinct difference between the two,
Mhm.
but having those different people on board to put what the service is or the product that you have out in the public is very important, because you can't do everything. I know because of limited resources, a lot of businesses, they want to try to just one stop show. It
Mhm.
doesn't work. It just, you don't have enough hours in a day, especially if you have a 9 to 5.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
whoever is giving you that 9 to 5, every 2 weeks paycheck, they have expectations. And if you do a bad job, especially myself, my 9 to 5 is very public in a way.
Right.
So if I do a bad job in that, it tarnishes my reputation in general.
Right.
So, and that will, leak over to my private business.
Right.
So that's important. And then of course, having an accountant, and having an attorney on hand. Kanasha also serves as my attorney because she's also a lawyer. Hey,
Worked
you
out
know,
well. You got a one-stop shop there.
with her, you get a lot of bang for your
Mhm.
buck. But getting an attorney on board, and then take advantage, folks. And I'm sure, Stephanie, you'll say the same, of all these organizations that
Mhm.
are there to help. They will answer your questions, and they have people on staff. They're paying people to answer all your questions.
Mhm.
And because many of them are doing this for free or at a very low cost, they feel no pressure to like lie to you or pretend they know something that they don't know.
Right.
You can call and say, hey, I need somebody to help me put together a marketing plan or budget. And they'll say, you know what, we're not experts in that. But work with so and so and so and so, because we've worked with them before. We've had clients that work with them before.
Mhm. Mhm.
All of these um, Chamber of Commerce's, they all
Mhm.
have small business loans, and they will walk you through it step by step.
Mhm.
There are consequences to working with orgs, and the frustration. Sometimes they don't have big staffs, so they're not
Mhm.
available every day at all the
Mhm.
time. But it is what it is, and you give a little to get a. It's a give and take.
Right.
An
Right.
organization may help you for free, but they're not going to be readily accessible to you all the time. So
Right.
that means you can't wait till the last minute.
But
Things
some
like,
of it you got to figure out for yourself.
yeah.
Some
And
of
then you got to read a book,
you
read
got
a
right.
magazine, do your
Google
research.
yourself.
You know, Black Enterprise magazine. I've had a subscription to it for years. I'm not going to lie. I just subscribed because it said Black and I'm going to support. But I didn't really take the time to read through the pages of this magazine. Great information. Learn
Mhm.
from other people's mistakes.
Right.
I'll never forget when we were naming the business. I really wanted to name the business Black, just BLACK. And I was like, this is great. We're gonna be blackity black, black, black. We're gonna do everything black. And it was one of my non-black friends. And this was hard for her to say to me. So she did her little research, because I could tell she was like, I'm not going to say this to this girl without having backup. She was like, Sandy, I totally agree with you that you want to support Black businesses and Black culture. And I know it's needed. but do you really want to limit yourself? Like, oh, your business black. Do you really want to limit your audience? Do you really? And you know, I know that was a hard call. I laughed because just the fact of the tone she had, because I could tell she was walking on eggshells. Because I mind you, she's not black.
She was wrong. She was.
To say this to me, and she was right.
Mhm.
100%. She was
Mhm.
right.
Mhm.
It would have been too forward, and there's
In your
people
face.
have draw so many conclusions from things. It just would have been too much.
Mhm.
But because I'm Sandy, I was like, okay, we're not gonna say black in English. We'll say it in French. It'll be
They
softer.
may not know.
Yeah, and that's why we came up with noir. And she agreed. She was like, it because it was a different language and we're here in this state, it softened it.
Mhm.
I was still happy. I still felt like I was keeping it real, for lack of a better term, and that it still celebrated what I wanted to do. It still presented the image I wanted to give, and it celebrated my Haitian heritage.
Right.
It gave it that little bougie feel that I wanted it to have.
Right.
It just did all the things I needed to do, but all of this was because, she did some research and she brought it to my attention. She encouraged me to do some research because there's a lot that goes into a name, and there's a lot, and that goes into a tagline and so on and so forth. So people have to be willing to do all those trainings and to listen to people
Yeah.
and to listen.
Yeah,
Because
that's the hard and fast rule, because you have in your head what you think is supposed to happen, but it does take a team of people. And have you found that, as I have over the years, my team in some cases have evolved. There's some people that are still steadfast there, my mentors, but some of them have been, as I've come in and out of learning about different people and what they do, we've sort of latched on each other, I guess, as a means of staying alive and staying afloat.
oh yes, your team evolves too, because
Absolutely.
they make mistakes, or you make mistakes together,
Mhm.
and you realize some relationships, to save the relationship, you have to cut the business ties, and
Absolutely.
some people you just have to not necessarily walk away, but put on pause,
Mhm.
and then just to keep the friendship, because maybe there's sometimes there's nothing wrong with that team member or yourself. It's just the collaboration. It's not
It's
the right time
working.
for it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And especially when people are at different phases in their careers or in their business,
Mhm.
where there has to be some type of where you're meeting each other halfway, and that everybody's getting something out of it,
Absolutely.
either at the
Absolutely.
current time or in the future.
And
But when
everybody's
one
putting the
person,
same amount into it
when
as well.
everyone's putting the same amount of energy,
Mhm.
Tika Rose events, wonderful event planner, Luke Svet's events. These were all event planners that I knew before I opened the space. And um, both event groups were at different phases in their businesses, and were able to help me in different ways. Where Tika Rose, she really, because she'd worked in so many different venues, she was able to really tell me what I needed to make my venue work for the general population.
Mhm.
And she was also able to give me that the look that I wanted,
Mhm.
but for a price that I could afford.
Right.
And then I had Luke Svet's design, which is fine, high-end event planning, international event planning, global event planning, who was able to just tweak some of the ideas I brought to them, and they were able to say to me, okay, if you're really looking to look high end, it's not necessarily the amount of money you make, but sometimes less is more. And
Right.
she was able to
Absolutely.
do that. I worked with both event companies at different times, at different phases, but they both brought something to the table. And I was able to bring them clients at different times as well, in the system. And I think that's the big thing about a team too.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important. You really got to be cognizant of how much people are putting in or investing in you. And you got
Mhm.
to be willing to give as well. And to
Yes.
be honest with people, just to be very transparent and say, yo, thank you so much for what you're doing, but I don't have anything to give you right now.
Right.
We can do an exchange. You can use the space. I worked with the great Greg's photography. Greg, I could not afford Greg, excellent
Mhm.
photographer. And he was like, I need a space to do a workshop let's do a trade, let's do a barter. And we were able to function that way.
Okay.
Um, a lot of the organizations that had events at my space,
Mhm.
they're organizations that are raising money to service the community. So they couldn't afford to pay $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 to use a space. So I gave them a lower rate, and they helped me promote the space, and then I got clients from that. You really
Right.
got to be open to bartering and doing
Mhm.
exchanges, and then to being fair, because I couldn't ask a chef to come cook food for me for free, because then he has to put money out to do that.
Right.
He might be able to donate his time, but I have to be able to at least front the money for the product.
Right.
And you really have to put yourself in the person's shoes that you're asking for the favor and for the barter, to make sure that you're not asking too much or
Right.
telling them to give too much, and that you're willing to give. Because I think that's when relationships go left, and people are
I
not
agree.
happy. People feel taken advantage of
I
when they
agree.
feel like what they're putting in is too much versus what they're getting out of it.
I agree. Ashley wants you to tell her about the logo. And then right after that, because by the way, people, we are at 55 minutes. Yay! This is the first time we're going to break an hour. Yay! So once you tell me us about the logo, if you could tell us how we can find you.
Well, you can definitely, I had some great interns and some great assistants. Ashley did a wonderful job of creating this logo. That was a mission in and of itself, because I think the reason she wants me to talk about that is because I thought I could do it myself. I took a workshop, shout out to Venture Cafe and Radical Partners, because they gave the small business workshop. I took it and I was like, I'm gonna build my own website and I'm gonna make my own logo.
You got this.
2-day workshop. I got this.
No.
The workshop helped me because it helped me ask the right questions to the person who I paid to do it.
Okay.
And I ended up finding this great young lady named from her company's called Ashley's Creatives. And she redid my logo. She redid my website. She got me my social media platforms on point. But I was able to, really get on her nerves, because of the workshop, I knew what questions to ask. I knew if I wanted my website to be, in WordPress or something else, I wanted to be able to ask the right questions. So definitely, some things you can do yourself, but you have to be honest with yourself, because if you want something high quality, you need a professional.
Absolutely. And I come from that creative space. So that's always my argument of the day is there is somebody out there that can probably do this better. Especially if that's not your expertise. And that's why I've got a social media expert. That's
There
why
you go.
I've got camera expertise. That's why I got someone else to do my website. So, and that's all a part of the team. Those people that you even contract to do those services, they're just as invested in you as you are in what you're trying to do. But you have to respect what they do by giving them something back of value. So that's my argument of the day. How can we find you?
You can find me at noir.com, or I think the easiest way to keep in touch with me is through social media. I kept it simple. It's just my full name, Sandy Dorsainvil. Facebook, it's Sandy Dorsainvil. Instagram, my website is also sandydorsainvil.com. I kept it simple. And then my email address, which I read my emails, it feels like all day, is sandydorsainvil@gmail.com.
Okay. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. As I mentioned, this has been a wealth of information. I'm very excited about what you were able to share on the public side of what you do. I think it's going to be great for those who may be in that transition phase as well. So thank you again. I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Stuff to talk about. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the work you're doing. You have such positive energy, and you have been such a blessing to those of us who are trying to evolve in this community. You're always putting out information for all of us and doing the work that we are not the experts is doing. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
You too. You too. Bye-bye.
So, everyone, as I said, I'm very excited. This is the first time we've been at a 1 hour show. Woo! And it was great, 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 great information. I mean, I know I learned a lot. And it's wonderful to know that she is going to try it again. So, grand opening, I will be there and we will definitely let you know when that's going to be. So, thank you again. This is the last show of the week. Next week, we start again on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I have to be honest, I forgot to look and see who our guests are, but I know one of them will be Kanemo Williams, who's been sending questions and wanted me to make sure I share that Sandy is the real deal. So, so please tune in Tuesday at 10 o'clock, Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and Thursday at 10 o'clock. We are going to continue our conversation around how to pivot, how to prepare, how to move, how to sustain in challenging times. Have a great weekend. We hope to see you next week. And thank you. Talk to you soon.